So before we start this video, I would like to thank UP KEM for inviting me to give this talk to them about web development. It might feel unusual na a chemical engineering organization is inviting me to give a talk on web development, pero I think they have a team for web development and they wanted me to teach them about it. That's why I made this talk so that people with zero experience would have an idea of what the web is like and what web development is like. The aim of this talk is to ease in or introduce the web and web development to people who know nothing about it. So, for example, what role do HTML, CSS, and JavaScript play in web development, and what PHP is, what SQL is, and how all that stuff is connected. The original talk is 2 hours long, and I decided to split it up into more segments so it would be easier for you to watch. And as always, I put timestamps in my videos so you could just check out the ones you want to check out. So again, I would like to thank UP KEM for inviting me to give this talk to them and agreeing to record the video for everyone's viewing. Whether you're a member of UP KEM or not, I hope you learned something from this very, very shallow introduction to web development. Okay, so an introduction to web development. This presentation was built in mind na a lot of you hindi kayo familiar with web development, and if anything, yung familiarity ninyo with programming stops at Python or stops at MATLAB, no? And specifically, request sa akin is to teach you basics ng HTML, CSS, JavaScript, PHP, and SQL, no? And how they work with the web. Okay, so what we want by the end of the talk is we know what happens, no, around the web. We know how web applications work, tsaka general sense of direction on learning more. Kasi we will tackle how the web works with HTTP, no? We'll discuss that later. And how it works with the languages I said before. Then we will have some basics with each of the languages. And then Q&A after everything. And yung sinend na preliminary Q&A sa akin, marami nagtatanong paano mag-host ng website. So if we have time for that, and if you have time for that, let us tackle that as well. Okay? So what we will not tackle in the talk. Okay? Note na 2 hours lang yung talk or even less. So sa mga standard workshops namin in CSI and DSC, each of the languages, they take like a couple of these 2-hour sessions. No, each of the languages. So we have 5 here plus SQL. No? And we're only tackling it in under 2 hours. Okay? So definitely may masasacrifice in terms of depth sa syntax tsaka sa grammar. Pero yun nga, yung aim nga talaga natin is a general sense of direction for improvement tsaka rudimentary understanding of how everything works. We will not tackle how each HTML tag works in depth, no? Each possible CSS style in depth, no? Each JS method, stuff like that. Okay? So Carlos, paano namin malalaman to? Google nyo sila, like everyone else. Okay? So, let's start with the web. So, dalawa lang yung basic stuff na you need to know with the web. We have documents and resources na na-identify by a URL. Okay? That's what URL means, no? Uniform Resource Locator. Ganito itsura ng URL if you haven't seen one before. And in short, this just means stuff can be accessed through an address. Okay, we have an address, we could access the stuff. Tapos they are transferred through HTTP. Hypertext Transfer Protocol. You've heard of this in high school probably. No, yun yung procedure na ginagamit natin for accessing the stuff. Okay? So, this sounds very technical na URL, HTTP, no, you really can't absorb it masyado kasi it's all technical stuff. May analogy ako dyan. No, so una, stuff can be accessed through an address, diba? So, let's say we want to access a book, no? Ito yung address niya. Merong Dewey Decimal System sa library, tapos ito yung address ng library, right? We all know how to read this naman. In web development, ganun din. right? So we have a page. So for example, in Uvle, and ito yung address niya. Okay? That's one of the basics ng web broken down, no? Address and the resource, no? So kanina I said na, yeah, we know how to read this. How do we read this one? Okay? So I got from Google na lang. Don't want to make my own. So we have a protocol, no? HTTPS. S just means secure or something, no? Then we have a domain. So in this case, yung Uvle hanggang kay PH is our domain. And then we have a path, no? So basically these are folders. Within sa quote-unquote server ni Uvle, may folder ako na course. And then may file ako na view.php. And then may finifeed na akong parameters na ID 9232. So meaning nito is, can you give me view.php sa folder na course sa domain ni Uvle with the protocol na HTTPS, no? And then I'll send you this extra data na 9232, okay? Probably this is an ID for the course itself, no? Yung second part ng web is yung HTTP is the procedure we use for accessing the stuff. Ano ba yung procedure natin sa paghiram na libro? Diba? So first you ask the librarian for the book. Very simple, very simplified view of things, no? And then the librarian gives you the book, 1 and 2. So the same way sa web, ginagawa natin, I'll send Uvle a request, no? Parang Uvle, pwedeng penge ako ng page nito, and then ito yung address ng page na yan. And then titignan ni Uvle yung request mo, and hopefully gives you the page. It's not 100% sure na bibigyan niya sa'yo yung page. So, paano ito mag-fail? Pwedeng hindi ka naka-login, that's 1. Pwedeng hindi nag-e-exist yung page, that's 2. Pwedeng mag-error yung Uvle, pwedeng down yung Uvle, no? So, there are many things that can go wrong. So, hopefully gives you the page. No? Same thing with the library, mali mo wala yung libro, or hindi ka pala pwedeng maghiram ng ganong klaseng libro. So, ganoon yung HTTP. We have a request, and then we have a response, no? It's a request-response system, HTTP. It's really that simple. No? So to recap again, no? We have 2 things with the web. Resources can be located using an address, right? And resources can be transferred through HTTP with requests and responses. So ano yung extra terms dito? So yung book na binaborrow natin in real life can be analogous to a web page, no? Ito yung isang web page sa Uvle. No? Can also be some resource. It doesn't have to be HTML. It doesn't have to be a web page. Pwedeng yung dulo nito is something.pdf, which is we see quite often kapag nag-Uvle tayo then nag-access tayo ng PDF, di ba? Na yung URL, it ends in an PDF. That's quite possible, no? And it happens a lot na kapag visit natin yun, mada-download yung file. Or if you're using Chrome, mag-open siya sa isang specialized na viewer. So it's not always web pages. Can also be some resource like a file. Yung librarian natin is the web server. Okay? Later on, we can elaborate on this. You, no, arguably, you're the web browser. Yung browser, bale, natatanggap niya yung document and then ipapakita niyo sa'yo as the user na ganito yung itsura and stuff. Okay? So kanina, sinabi natin the web server yung librarian. Yung counterpart naman niya sa'yo, you are called the client. Okay, you're the web client. And then, yun nga sinasabi ko, HTTP is a request-response protocol. Much like, yun nga, asking for a book and then you receiving it. No? Let's tackle different types of requests. We have a couple of very common ones. We have a get request, view something. No? So, if you're visiting the homepage of Uvle, you're looking at Facebook, stuff like that. Chances are, yung browser mo nagsisend siya ng get request. No? Get is a code. So, basically, yung intention nun is just to view a resource. No? View a web page or view a file. In contrast, yung post or put request, no? With the intention of your sending data. So, if you're logging into Facebook, logging into Uvle, nagsasubmit ka na answers, yung request mo, nagsisend siya ng data. Okay? Now, it doesn't mean na dahil get request ka, wala kang sinesend na data. It's possible na you're including data in your request. For example, kanina here, nagdadagdag tayo na ID 9232. no? In a way, we're sending data, pero hindi siya parang hindi siya talaga hindi siya with the intention of changing something. Another technical note with this is sa post request, sa request mo mismo nagdadala ka ng data. Okay, nagdadala ka ng username, nagdadala ka ng password, nagdadala ka ng quiz answers, no? Sa get request, more or less, you're not bringing that data. Okay, the most na you're bringing with the get request is anong browser ginagamit ko, naka-mobile ba ako, stuff like that, no? Which dinadala din ni post. So, yun yung limitations ni get and yun yung limitation ni post. Now, arguably, you might say, Carlos, bakit di na lang tayo gumamit ng post sa lahat? Well, it's better na we differentiate yung mga post and get requests natin para to easily make things more secure. Again, there are other requests like delete, stuff like that. Pero ito yung pinaka-common request na nangyayari or nagagamit sa web. Natakal natin yung requests, so let's go on to responses, okay? Yung first na response is yung sana pinaka-common, no? 200 okay, your request is good, here's your data. So kung pumunta ako sa Ovle ngayon, and then nagbalik siya sa akin ng webpage, 200 okay yun. Now, there are times then na you would get these, probably you have experienced some of these na, 404 not found, siguro nagka-typo ka sa URL. No, that also happens. 401 unauthorized, kung hindi ka naka-log in, and then walang authentication, wala kang pinapasang authorization, hindi bibigay sa'yo ng server yung resources kasi yun nga, hindi ka authorized. Yung forbidden naman, authorized ka pero kulang pa rin yung yung authorization mo. So kunyari, you're logged in as a student sa Ovle and you're trying to access a teacher resource. 500 internal server error naman is kapag nagka-bug na yung code sa web server mismo. So nag-error siya mismo and most likely wala kang kasalanan dun. Okay? Kasi yung server yung nagka-error, right? So again, there are many more responses. Masa-search na yan. Marami sila. Pero the web is more than a library, no? Web pages are very special. Parang Harry Potter na yun nga gumagalaw yung mga pages natin. Okay? So here we start introducing more technical stuff. Our web pages, they're defined by the following languages. We have HTML, yun yung the page itself. So, kita niyo dito, the book itself. So, yun yung nagdi-dictate ng structure ng page. So, for example, dito sa newspaper, yung file na yun yung nagdi-dictate, okay, yung title ko, serious cited, and then I have a body of text, and then I have an image. No? So, yun yung dinidictate ng HTML. If you're going to go to example.com, no, or something.com without anything, no, kasi 'di ba kanina meron tayong view.php. Pero if you're going to a website lang and then walang file na nakasunod, right? Ganyan lang siya. Chances are ibibigay sa is index.html, no? Parang kung pumunta ako sa, let's say, anong magandang website, google.com, right? So pumunta ako dyan, sasabihin mo sa akin, Carlos, wala naman .html dito, wala naman file, domain lang. Technically, you are accessing an index.html over here, no? So that's what happens if you're going to a root of a domain. No, may index.html doon. The second language na you have to know is CSS. You look and feel ng isang web page. So to go back with our newspaper analogy, yung CSS yung nagdidictate ng laki ng image, yung sizes ng font, yung color ng font, yung font mismo, yun yung dinidictate ng CSS. Then later on, once you have mastered the both of these, you should be learning JS, no? Yung parang sentience ng page. Siya yung nagbibigay ng logic sa page. So, basically ginagawa na to is minamanipulate niya yung HTML and CSS based on programmable stuff. Okay? So, to recap, HTML is yung structure, CSS is yung look and feel, and JS is the logic. Okay? So, to show you, ito yung Ovle without JS, no? Kung walang JS yung Ovle, hindi gagana yung My Courses button, walang magpa-pop out. Kasi yung JS yung responsible for that, no? Na parang dinedetect niya na kinlik mo siya, and then magpapalabas ako ng extra stuff sa HTML, may modify ako sa HTML para pakita ko sa'yo na ito yung mga courses ko. Wala yon. Okay? So, wala yung JS na yon, hindi gagana yung button na to. For sure, there's like a ton of buttons here na won't work without JavaScript also. Okay? Now, this is Ovle without CSS. No, it kinda looks like shit. No? Kita nyo, it's just random structure na wala yung font, parang naging Times New Roman yung font. No? And then kita nyo kulay blue yung links. So, yan. Ganyan yung itsura ng Ovle without CSS. And Ovle without HTML is just nothing. Kasi it's like a book without a book. Diba? To elaborate more on the web, no? Kanina, sinasabi natin na sa librarian na, okay, pwede mo ba akong bigyan ng book? Sasabihin ng librarian sa'yo, okay, ito yung book. Walang problema. Diba? Pero some libraries, no? Some libraries or some web servers, they do more than serve yung HTML, yung CSS, tsaka yung JavaScript or any file you want to access. Some of them act like systems talaga. No? So, kung pupunta ka sa Facebook, yung home ng Facebook ko is different from home ng Facebook mo. 'Di ba? Bale, ginagawa ng web server is nagko-consult siya ng external database, right? Later on, we'll also tackle that. Nagko-consult siya ng external database and then mo-modify niya yung HTML na ibibigay niya sa'yo, yung babato niya sa'yo. Okay? So, kumbaga, parang you ask the librarian for a book, no? Sabi mo sa librarian, okay, pwede mo ba ibigay sa akin yung facebook.com? And then gagawin ni librarian, magko-consult siya ng record book, no? And then susulat siya ng sarili niyang book, and then bibigay niya sa'yo. No? It's that complicated with other web apps, no? Kunyari, Facebook, Twitter, Google, no? Also Ovle. Ganun yung nangyayari. Na not every HTML is the same. Okay? Na hindi lang sila file. Parang may dinadagdag pa silang processing in the background, no? Bago nila ibigay sa'yo yung HTML, yung CSS, tsaka yung JavaScript, no? Bago nila ibigay sa'yo yung web page. May gagawin pa sila, magko-compute pa sila, no? Ganun nag-a-act yung mga ibang web apps natin. So usually tawag natin dito is dynamic, no? Compared to the static stuff na sinabi natin before. Kasi before, no, yung concept natin na nagre-request tayo ng file, in theory, hindi natin masyado pinapalitan yung file na yon. Si Elmo, si John, or si Blue, nag-access sila ng the same HTML, we will get the same document. That's called static HTML. Pero kunyari nag-Facebook kami apat, magkakaiba. So, tawag nun is dynamic. Yung key term dito is kapag nagka-database na involved, dynamic HTML na siya. Okay? So, yun. We have static and dynamic stuff, no? And yung kanina. So, ganito yung itsura niyan. So, yung mga ibang applications yan, may HTTP, magko-communicate with some software, no? And then magko-communicate with the database, and then ibabato sa'yo pabalik yung response. Okay? So, yung mga web server software na ginagamit natin, commonly Apache tsaka Nginx. Mga databases, usually gamit is MySQL, PostgreSQL, and MongoDB. No? So again, sabi ko kanina, web servers, they prepare your HTML. Tapos, talk to. Wrong grammar. No? And talk to the database when you send your HTTP request. No? And then databases, on the other hand, hold data relevant to the application. Now, this is a very simplified view. Some people, no, bigger companies may app servers pa in between the web server and the database, no? Bale, naka-dedicate lang yung web server sa pag-process na HTTP, and then naka-defer na sa app servers yung pag-process ng application mismo. Okay? So, ano pa? Yung web servers natin, bale, we can actually use any language we want. Pero PHP is a very common programming language sa pag-serve ng web apps. Okay? So, nangyayari, yung web server mo, it receives the request, it processes it, yung PHP code, tapos ibibigay sa'yo HTML. Walang PHP na nasasend sa'yo. Puro HTML lang. No? Puro HTML lang, CSS, JavaScript. Okay? So, PHP, it's used by apps like Facebook, no, very big company, WordPress, tsaka Wikipedia. No, so even though you're accessing a PHP file over here, you're actually accessing a PHP script na ine-execute ng web server and then ibabato sa'yo yung HTML. Okay? So, yung HTML na nabato sa'yo, re-render ng browser with or without CSS or JavaScript. Okay, in summary, yung web, resources are located via URL, no? This includes pages and files. Tapos, HTTP, yung gamit sa paggalaw ng mga resources. Tapos, yung mga pages natin, they are in HTML. Then, they're supplemented by CSS and or JavaScript and are rendered by your web browser. And then, more complicated web apps, they interact with the database in contrast to static web pages, no? Na walang database kailangan. So, PHP is a popular language used for web apps. And I think that's it for the web. Okay, any questions so far?
Kasi you mentioned like websites like Facebook, ganun, and the like. So, where do machine learning or other algorithms come in sa web development? Kasi for example, sa Facebook, nakita tayo ng personalized ads and stuff like that. So, diba, where does it come in?
Okay, machine learning and AI, it's a very hot topic, no? So, it comes in at the back end, no? So, yung back end na sinasabi natin dito, actually, I'll explain this right now. So, all of you are more aware of it. So, front end is ito, right? Front end is yung pag-design ng UI, yung pag-process ng data into an HTML, no? Kasi you're talking to a database, eh. All you're getting from the database is, okay, ito first name ni user, ito last name ni user, stuff like that. Ito yung mga posts ko, no? And then front end, ginagawa niya, given that data, is pro-process niya into an HTML and then bibigay niya sa client. Okay, yun yung ginagawa ni front end. Back end naman is nakatanggap siya ng request sa'yo. For example, post request siya. No? So kung post request siya, kunyari nag-login ka, gagawa siya ng session for you, may kakausapin niya yung database, stuff like that then. Okay? So where does machine learning and AI come in? So, kunyari nag-get request ako sa Facebook and then napasa yun sa backend, no? Mangyayari is matatanggap ni web server yung request. Alam ko, si John Kagape yung nag-send ng request na to. Okay? So, sa start na niya yung process of personalizing your web page sa Facebook, di ba? So, gagawin niya, fetch niya yung data mo from the database. Okay, get all the data we know on John Kagape from our databases. Titignan niya lahat yun. And then with that algorithm, with that same algorithm na sasabi natin, ML or AI, is paprocess niya yung data mo. And then, sasabihin niya, okay, itong ad na to, okay siya. Itong post na to, okay siya. Pakita natin kasi crush niya. Parang ganun. No? So, all of that computation, it happens at the back end. No? All yung pag-usap ng web server tsaka nung database over here. No? Over here. So, yun nga kanina, basta over here, nangyayari is yung sinasabi natin ML and AI algorithms. Yun nga, sinasabi ko kanina may app server, di ba? Some people have a dedicated app server. I-defer niya to a different server to compute. Okay? So that happens here at the back. And then kapag ready na siya, okay, na-collect ko na lahat ng gusto ko with our algorithms and stuff. Doon niya bibuild yung HTML and then send niya sa browser mo. Did that answer your question?
Yeah. Thanks.
If you're wondering kung PHP din yung language na ginagamit sa ML, hindi. Okay? Pwede kasi gumawa ako ng Python script, no? And then, nakatanggap ako ng request, then kakall ko yung Python script na yon, right? And then, makakatanggap na naman siya ng data. So, parang may interfacing between languages per se. No? May interfacing between files. So, yun. Yun yung nangyayari. Thank you for watching this part of the Introduction to Web Development series. Please stay tuned for the next part, and I'll see you there.